You were at the table. You were in the conversation. You were physically present in a room full of people who know your name, who invited you, who would call you a friend. And somewhere in the middle of all of it you felt it, that specific quiet feeling of being completely alone. Not sad exactly, not angry, just separate. Like there is a layer of glass between you and everyone else, and nobody else can see it. They are laughing and you are watching them laugh. They are talking and you are tracking the conversation from somewhere slightly outside of it. And you smile at the right moments, and you say the right things, and you go home and sit in your car in the driveway for 10 minutes. Because you do not know what else to do with what just happened. This is not a social anxiety problem. This is not shyness. This is something much more specific. And it is one of the most consistent and least talked about experiences of being an INFJ. The loneliness that lives inside a full life. The isolation that exists not because people are absent, but because real connection is. This video is about why that happens and what is actually driving it. Brainy quiet mind, let's go. You are always the one who understands, and rarely the one who gets understood. There is an imbalance at the center of almost every INFJ relationship, and it starts so early and runs so consistently that most INFJs have stopped noticing it. You are the one who understands. In every friendship, every family dynamic, every romantic relationship, you are the one doing the most reading, the most tracking, the most genuine effort to understand what the other person is actually experiencing underneath what they are saying. You catch what they did not say. You notice the shift in their energy before they name it. You understand them, often, better than they understand themselves. And you do this naturally, without effort, without being asked. It is just how your mind engages with people. The problem is that this creates a fundamental asymmetry in almost every relationship you are in. You understand them deeply. They understand a version of you, the version you present, the version that is legible to them, the version that does not require them to operate at a depth most people are not capable of. And that gap between how deeply you see others and how shallowly most people see you is one of the primary engines of INFJ loneliness. What makes it worse is that most of the people in your life are not withholding. They are not choosing to stay at the surface. They are genuinely giving you everything they have. Their best effort at understanding you is just not deep enough to reach where you actually live. And there is something uniquely painful about being failed by someone's best effort. Because you cannot be angry about it, you cannot ask for more than someone's maximum, and you cannot explain what is missing without sounding like you are criticizing people who genuinely care about you. So what happens over time is that the INFJ stops trying to be fully understood. Not consciously, not as a decision, but as a gradual adaptation. You start editing yourself down to the version that fits. You share the parts of your inner world that land and keep the rest. The deeper parts, the stranger parts, the parts that would require too much explanation, to yourself. And that process of self-editing, repeated across every relationship in your life, produces an interior world that almost nobody has ever actually visited. You are surrounded by people who know you, and completely alone in the place where you actually live. The mask you never decided to wear. Most INFJs do not think of themselves as people who wear a mask. That framing feels dramatic, feels like it belongs to someone with something to hide. But what most INFJs do, so automatically and so early that it stopped feeling like a choice, is present a functional version of themselves that is curated for legibility. Not fake, not dishonest, just incomplete. The version of you that can exist in a given room without requiring everyone in that room to operate at a level they are not capable of. This starts young. The INFJ child who notices early that their thoughts are too complex for the conversation, that their feelings are too big for the environment, that who they actually are produces confusion or discomfort in the people around them. That child learns to translate, to compress, to offer a version of themselves that fits. And that translation becomes so automatic over years that it starts to feel like personality rather than adaptation. The INFJ stops knowing where the mask ends and the self begins. The loneliness this produces is very specific. It is not the loneliness of being unloved. Most INFJs are loved by the people in their lives. It is the loneliness of being loved for a version of yourself that is not the whole version. Of having real, genuine relationships built on something real but incomplete. Of knowing that if the people who love you saw all of it, the full interior, the depth of the thinking, the actual complexity of what you experience, some of them would not know what to do with it. And so the mask stays, not because you are protecting yourself from bad people, but because taking it off requires the other person to be capable of holding what is underneath it. And most people, through no fault of their own, are not. The average person is not equipped to be the kind of witness the INFJ actually needs. That is not a criticism of anyone. It is just a structural incompatibility that produces a very specific kind of loneliness. The loneliness of being genuinely cared for by people who are genuinely not enough. The exit from this is not finding people who are smarter or more emotionally developed. It is learning to offer more of the real self in smaller doses and building tolerance for the discomfort of being seen imperfectly rather than not being seen at all. You connect at depth or not at all, and depth is rare. INFJs do not do casual connection. This is not a preference or a social philosophy. It is a functional reality of how the INFJ processes relationships. For the INFJ, a relationship only feels real when it reaches a certain depth. When something genuine is being exchanged, when the conversation has moved past what people do and into who people actually are, when there is a quality of mutual recognition, not just liking each other, but actually seeing each other. Below that threshold, connection does not register as connection for the INFJ. It registers as proximity. You can be around someone for years, see them regularly, have hundreds of pleasant interactions, and still feel nothing that resembles genuine closeness, because the depth threshold was never crossed. And the INFJ does not know how to pretend otherwise. They cannot manufacture a feeling of closeness that the interaction has not produced. So they go through the motions, they show up, they engage, they participate, while internally experiencing the whole thing as a kind of elaborate loneliness. The problem is that the depth the INFJ requires for real connection is not something most people naturally operate at. And it is not something that can be rushed or forced. It requires a specific quality of honesty, vulnerability, and willingness to engage with complexity that a significant portion of the population is either not capable of or not interested in. Which means the INFJ is, statistically, moving through a social world where the kind of connection they need is genuinely rare, not impossible, but rare enough that years can pass between real encounters. What most INFJs do in response to this scarcity is one of two things. They either keep investing in surface relationships hoping depth will develop, and experience repeated disappointment when it does not, or they stop investing in relationships altogether and live in the space of not trying, which is quieter but produces its own slow damage. The more functional path is harder but more honest, accepting that real connection for an INFJ will always involve fewer people, longer timelines, and higher standards than average, not as a consolation, as a design feature. The INFJ who stops measuring their social life by the quantity of connections and starts measuring it by the quality of the deepest ones stops experiencing the absence of shallow connection as a personal failure, the exhaustion of always being the strong one. At some point in almost every INFJ's social world, a quiet assignment happened that nobody officially made, but everybody accepted. You became the strong one, the stable one, the one people call when things fall apart, the one who knows what to say, who can hold the weight, who does not get rattled the way other people do. And you took that role, not because you were asked, but because you were capable. And being capable felt like a reason to be needed, and being needed felt like a version of belonging. The cost of that role is something most INFJs carry for years before they name it. When you are always the strong one, you are never in a position to be the one who needs something. The dynamic is fixed. People come to you with their weight and you hold it. The idea of reversing that, of bringing your own weight, your own uncertainty, your own pain to someone else, and asking them to hold it, feels structurally wrong. like it violates the terms of every relationship you are in, like it would confuse people, like it would change how they see you in a way you cannot fully predict or control. So the INFJ's own interior life, the struggles, the fears, the exhaustion, the things that are genuinely hard, stays inside. Not because there is no one who would care, but because the role of the strong one does not include a moment where the strong one needs carrying. And over time, the accumulated weight of being strong for everyone, while being strong alone, becomes one of the most isolating experiences a person can have. You are surrounded by people you have helped. People who would say you matter to them, who would be there if you called. But calling feels impossible, because the call would require you to be something other than what you have always been in that relationship. And the risk of that shift, the vulnerability of suddenly needing something, feels more dangerous than continuing to carry everything alone. The loneliness inside this is very particular. It is not the loneliness of being unloved. It is the loneliness of being loved for your strength while the rest of you, the part that is tired, the part that is struggling, the part that needs someone, has never been introduced to anyone. You see people clearly, and that clarity can feel like distance. INFJs see people, not the version people present, the actual version, the motivations underneath the behavior, the fear operating behind the confidence, the wound producing the pattern. You read people with a precision that is both a gift and in certain moments a source of profound loneliness. Because when you see someone that clearly, you also see the gap between who they are and who they are trying to appear to be. And holding that gap in silence, which the INFJ almost always does, because sharing it would be cruel, creates a specific kind of distance that is invisible to the other person but very real to you. You are in a conversation with someone, and you know things about them they have not told you, not because they shared it, because you read it. The anxiety underneath the confidence, the need underneath the joke, the loneliness underneath the social performance, and you engage with them as if you do not know, because revealing that you know would make them feel exposed, and the INFJ does not do that to people. But the result is that every interaction has a layer you are navigating that they are not aware of. You are always operating on more information than the conversation accounts for. This is exhausting in a way that is very hard to explain, and it creates a loneliness that comes not from lacking connection, but from the nature of the connection itself. You are never quite in the same conversation as the other person. They are having the surface version. You are having that version plus the layer underneath it, plus your own internal processing of both. The gap between those two experiences means that even genuine, warm, meaningful interactions carry a slight quality of separateness for the INFJ, a sense of being slightly outside the shared reality of the room. Over time, this can make the INFJ feel fundamentally alone in a way they cannot fully articulate, not because something is wrong with their relationships, but because the way they experience reality is structurally different from how most of the people around them experience it. That difference does not go away. But naming it, understanding that the distance is a function of perception, not of being unwanted, changes how much weight it carries. The rare connection that changes everything, and why it is so hard to keep. Every INFJ has experienced it at least once. A connection that was different from everything else. A person who reached the depth threshold without being pushed, who asked the right questions without being coached, who could hold the real version of the INFJ without needing it to be simpler or lighter or more manageable, who saw behind the mask, not because the INFJ removed it, but because this person could see through it and stayed anyway. These connections are rare. The INFJ knows it in real time. There is a recognition that is almost disorienting. A feeling of finally, of this is what it was supposed to feel like, of I did not realize how much I was carrying until I put some of it down. And for the duration of that connection, the specific loneliness that defines so much of the INFJ's social experience simply lifts. Not because the circumstances changed, but because the quality of being seen is so different from everything else, that it recalibrates the entire experience of being alive. The tragedy is that these connections are also the hardest to keep. Partly because the INFJ, unaccustomed to being truly seen, does not always know how to handle it. The intimacy triggers the protection responses, the withdrawal, the self-sabotage, the pulling back at exactly the moment the connection is deepening. The very thing they wanted most becomes the thing they are most likely to damage once they have it. And partly because the person capable of that quality of connection is also, by definition, rare. They have their own depth, their own complexity, their own needs that require tending. Relationships at that level are not low maintenance. They require the INFJ to show up in ways that feel exposed and uncertain, not just to receive depth, but to offer it back without the usual editing, without the mask, without the managed version. Most INFJs do not lose these connections because of indifference. They lose them because depth was so unfamiliar that they did not know how to stay in it. Learning to stay, learning to tolerate being genuinely known by someone who can actually hold it, is one of the most important things an INFJ can develop, because these connections are not impossible. They are just rare enough that when they arrive, they deserve to be kept. The truth about INFJ loneliness, and the one thing that actually changes it, here is what nobody tells you about INFJ loneliness. It is not a problem with a solution in the conventional sense. It is not something that gets fixed by meeting more people, going to more social events, putting yourself out there more, or any of the standard advice that gets offered to people who feel isolated. The INFJ who tries to solve their loneliness with volume, more connections, more interactions, more socializing, does not become less lonely. They become more efficiently lonely. They collect more evidence of the depth gap faster. The loneliness is structural. It comes from having a way of experiencing the world that is genuinely different from how most people experience it, and from living in a social environment that was not designed with that difference in mind. You are going to feel alone in crowded rooms for the rest of your life. That is not a prediction. It is a design feature. The question is not how to stop feeling it. It is how to stop letting it mean what it currently means to you. Because right now, for most INFJs, the loneliness carries a specific story. The story goes, I feel alone because something is wrong with me, because I am too much, because I am fundamentally incompatible with connection, because this is what the rest of my life is going to feel like. That story is the actual problem, not the loneliness itself, the meaning the loneliness gets assigned. The shift that actually changes things is not external. It is not finding the right person or the right community, though those things matter. It is stopping the automatic interpretation of loneliness as evidence of deficiency. Understanding that feeling alone in a shallow room is not a symptom of being broken. It is a symptom of having depth in an environment that does not match it. That is not the same thing. The INFJ who accepts that real connection will always be rare, who stops measuring their worth by the quantity of people who understand them, who builds a relationship with their own interior life that does not depend on external validation to feel legitimate. That INFJ is no longer at the mercy of the loneliness. They still feel it, but they are no longer destroyed by it. And that difference is everything. 7 reasons. 7 layers of why the most empathetic, most perceptive, most genuinely present person in the room can also be the loneliest person in it. And none of them are your fault. None of them means something is wrong with you. All of them make complete sense once you understand the architecture of how you actually work. The loneliness is real, but the story you have been telling about what it means, that story is not accurate. And replacing that story slowly with one that is the work. Brainy Quiet Mind. Subscribe if this is the kind of conversation you need more of. Share this with the INFJ in your life who has never been able to explain why they feel this way. And one question for the comments. Answer it honestly. Have you ever felt completely alone in a room full of people who love you? And did you ever tell anyone?